Hey everybody, my name's Aaron, and I'd like to welcome you to Positive from Negative, where we're taking that pain and turning that pain into power and that power into purpose so we can grow and develop in this big, crazy world of ours. And if you're new here, welcome. It's great to see you. I really hope that you hear something here that will help you and that you can use. And if you do, please give me a like, give me a subscribe, share this video, if you know anybody you think could benefit from it. And if you're returning, hey, it's great to see you again. It's always good to see familiar faces. And if you would, drop me a line in the chat or in the comments below and tell me where you're tuning in from. I'd love to, kind of find out where my audience is and stuff. And so, anyway, we've got a lot of kind of change going on in the world right now, and I think that, especially yesterday. Yesterday was the Lunar New Year, and I just think that it feels like there's like an influx of energy coming to the planet, and that we're just all kind of having to adapt to. And I can tell you myself, I've been really just kind of lethargic and very just thirsty and dry feeling today, and like been having to drink so much water. And part of that's due to the fact that where I live, it's really windy and dusty. But I also, kind of just feel like there's so much of that energy around and stuff that it's just, kind of doing weird things. And so if you're having those symptoms, just know that, you should probably get checked out with your doctor, make sure that it's, nothing serious. But generally speaking, these symptoms are temporary and they just seem to be kind of fleeting. And, it just is an indicator that we're making progress in our ascension and evolution as humanity. So, but with that that kind of upgrade in energy and that influx of new energies and this new era that kind of seems to be upon us, it seems like to me that there's a lot of things that we carry a lot around with us, myself included, a lot of old emotional baggage, a lot of old memories, a lot of old like very charged, memories and things that we kind of feel about ourselves. And I think a good thing for us to do as we go into this new era is to do a form of, spiritual and emotional streamlining. And what I mean by that is, when you streamline something, you don't necessarily make huge changes to like usually it's for like an aircraft or a car or something like that. And yeah, and you don't change the full design of whatever it is. You just make adjustments to it so it creates less drag or has less weight and less things that can interfere with its performance and how far and fast it can go. And so, that's kind of what I see going on here is that I think, one of the most valuable things we can do is recognize in our lives and in our emotions, in our memories, where those things are that kind of hold us back and drag us down and add, unnecessary weight as we move, through this life. And so, it just seems to me that there's these things just kind of can't come with us. They seem like really heavy and dense and really not sort of appropriate for the energy that we're entering. And so, I think what we can do is recognize that, memories especially can feel very fresh, even decades later. I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict, and I've been sober for a long time, but I still have memories that come up from that time, like, 20, 25, 30 years ago that still feel very fresh and feel like, they're still kind of a part of who I am these days. It can feel like, if I really get to thinking about it, I can still identify with those memories and things that, should have been able to let go of a long time ago. And so that's kind of what I've been working through. And I've sort of come up with a process that I'd like to share that I think might help other people to be able to free themselves from those old limiting, and sort of embarrassing, maybe cringy memories or emotions and stuff that we hang on to, that are just baggage at this point. And so I think the first part of doing that is to really go within, or it can be it can be like a very intentional process. You can really sit down and meditate or journal or something, or it can be on the fly as, sometimes I'll be sitting in a traffic stoplight, in my car, and all of a sudden some memory will come flooding back of something stupid I did, drinking or something. And and in that moment, it'll feel like I'm right back there, like my heart will start pounding a little bit and stuff, and like I'll blush or like the embarrassment or the whatever, the anger will actually come over me like it's happening then, even though it happened 30 years ago. And so, we can either, like I said, we can either kind of dig deep to find these old memories and these old emotions, or we can just recognize them when they pop up. But the first thing we can do is recognize them, recognize that this is, a memory or an emotion or an opinion or a program or, some sort of conditioning that I carry within me that isn't serving me anymore. And once we do that, then it kind of, once we can recognize that it's there, for one thing, it's objectively true that that resides within us, but it's also objectively true that it's not being of any good or service to us, then we can start to take steps to take the charge out of that emotion or memory or whatever. And it doesn't mean that we're going to forget about them. Like, these things, the memory could stay with us forever. But what we can do is we can take that emotional charge out of it and, have it just be one less thing that, flies around in the storm in our head. And so, once what we can do is once we've, faced and recognized that emotion or whatever it is, we can sit down with it and we can feel it. And sometimes that's not fun. Sometimes it's really not fun to sit there and just feel it all the way through, whatever the embarrassment or the anger or the shame or whatever it was, to just sit there for about 60 to 90 seconds and just feel it. Let it just go, let it just course through you and kind of, get it over with in a way. And then once that's done, like feel it all the way through. And once you feel it kind of start to dissipate, just we could say out loud, like, this is no longer, or this isn't serving me anymore. I've learned the lesson from this emotion or memory or whatever. I've integrated into my life, and I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to learn that lesson. And I'm grateful for that emotion or memory for teaching me that lesson. But I'm lovingly releasing that charge, and letting it go out into the universe and freeing myself of that. And it's just amazing that, once we can start to do that, it's really becomes a streamlining process. I've been working on this for a few months myself, and really it's kind of a one at a time type of thing. I don't think there's any way that we can really do this in mass, but like I said, it's either, in the times that we have to actually sit down and do this as an activity, or in the moment when these old things pop up, to, recognize them, acknowledge them, then, basically recognize that it's no longer being of service and let it go. And really, that's all it takes. And I've noticed that after a few months of doing that, one at a time and stuff, the full process for each one, I've really started to feel a lot lighter. And what it's done is it's number one, it's released me from a lot of shame and a lot of resentment, a lot of fear. And a lot of things that have really, not been of service to me as I've gone along. And it's really helped me like renew my estimation of myself. Once I've freed myself of all these negative and like just generally crappy emotions and opinions and beliefs and stuff, then it kind of makes room for me to have experiences that are sort of in a higher octave, like in an octave of joy and peace and love, because there's only so much room within us. And so if we want to, free up room, for the good stuff, the joy, peace, and love, then we really kind of have to deal with the old stuff. And we don't deal with it by sweeping it under the rug. I really wish that would work. I wish we could just, take all those yucky things and put them into a pile and lift up the carpet and, sweep them under there. But unfortunately, that's just not what happens, because those things have a tendency to find their way back out. And so, it's kind of like pulling weeds. Like with these things, you really have to get all the way to the root, and pull it up so they can't grow back. And it's like I said, it's not necessarily a fun process, but it's a very lightening process. And in my opinion, it's really the first real step we can take toward affecting, like not just change, but like a complete, like, shift in our consciousness and who we are, how we show up in our lives, how we think of ourselves, and the esteem that we hold ourselves in. So, I just in all of this without, fundamentally changing, who we are. Your personality stays intact, like, your whoever you are at your foundation is unaffected. It's just we're kind of streamlining off these old, things that really were dragging us and weighing us down. And I just think that in the beginning, it's really kind of a chore, and it's one of those things that we really have to put a lot of effort into getting in the habit of doing. But once we get in the habit of it, it's really amazing how, as these these old memories and emotions pop up, how quickly we recognize it and be like, okay, like I'm going to feel this for a few seconds. Okay, now that's no longer serving me. I'm going to release that to universe and then make room for something better. And I keep the memory and everything, but it just doesn't have that negative charge to it anymore, and really just becomes integrated with who we are without adding undue weight and strain. Because life's already hard enough without dragging ourselves down, by attaching ourselves to these old bricks of memory, if you will. So, I just think that, that's one thing that I've been doing that has helped me so much. And I know that everybody has a lot of trauma and baggage and emotions that we carry around with us. And really, for the most part, it's unnecessary. There's no reason to feel shame or anger for something you did 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, unless there's like some extenuating circumstance or whatever that it's still like somehow relevant in your life now. But those things they become irrelevant, and it's okay to treat them as such. It's okay to let them go and realize that we're not that person anymore, and that's not what we do. And that, we can move on into this higher octave of emotions that doesn't include, shame and anger and guilt and stuff like that. So anyway, that's really all I had for today. I just wanted to put that out there. And I'm a professional life coach now. I am, certified and licensed and everything like that. So if you're interested in a personal session with me, there's an email address in the bio where you can reach out to me and we can figure that out. And then I'll have my website up soon where you can also schedule through there. But, I'd really, love to kind of get together and, share some ideas and stuff like that and kind of see what we can do together here and really, affect a positive change individually and in the collective. So anyway, I just hope everybody has another happy 24, and I will see you next time. Thanks.